I think it's thinking about relationships, who do you know and who knows you and who knows what you can do.
Power to Live More with Joe Dodds.
Welcome to the Power to Live More podcast, all about productivity, organisation, well-being, energy and resilience. I'm Jo Dodds, and I started this show to enable interesting people to share their stories about how they use their power to live more, and by that I mean to do the stuff that they want to do more than the stuff that they need to or should do. It's about creating a life for yourself where you have the energy, health and space to be happy and fulfilled, spending your time as you'd like, whether that be at work, home or somewhere else entirely. That's your choice.
Hello, my name is Ellie Dodds and I'm co-presenter, and today Joe is interviewing Susan Ritchie. Joe and Sue met online a good long while ago and are members of a small Facebook group where they have really got to know each other, even though they have never met and only spoke for the first time for the podcast. Sue is an executive coach and trainer who helps emerging leaders to develop their leadership presence, creating more impact and influence in order to take their careers to whatever heights they choose. She is the author of 2 books, Strategies for Being Brilliant, 21 Ways to be Happy, Confident and Successful, and her most recently published work, Strategies for Being Visible, 14 Profile Raising Ideas for Emerging Female Leaders. Back to the studio.
Today I'm interviewing Sue Ritchie of Susan Ritchie Leadership Development. Hi Sue, great to have you with me.
Hi Joe, it's lovely to be here. Thank you for asking me.
It's so exciting because we were saying earlier that we've been Facebook friends and within a group where we actually have got to know the people in the group quite well, and yet we didn't know each other, and yet again we have quite a lot in common with our sort of relative businesses, so really excited to be talking to you.
It's lovely, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, we've been in that group, 3 years or so, and the nature of the group, yes, we do know each other quite well now, and so it's lovely to be able to speak to you at long last.
Yes, exactly. I'll probably have to add some more people to the list, won't I?
You will.
So start by telling us who you are, what you do and where you do it.
Okay, so I'm Sue Ritchie and I run a leadership development business called Susan Ritchie Leadership Development, and basically my aim is to help improve the quality of leadership in the world, primarily through helping more women to move into more senior leadership positions. So my specialist area is in helping them to develop their leadership presence so they create more of the impact they need to be successful as leaders, which obviously helps their teams, their organisations and their businesses to be more successful as well. So I'm here in the UK in Lincoln, but I work all over the country and I work internationally as well. Last year I went to the Middle East and delivered some women's leadership programs there. So I coach, which is my favourite thing to do in the world, one-to-one leadership and exec coaching. I design and run workshops for organisations, and I also write books. I'm the author of 2 books, Strategies for Being Brilliant, and my latest book, Strategies for Being Visible, 14 Profile Raising Ideas for Emerging Female Leaders. So in a nutshell, that's what I do, Joe.
Wow, sounds very exciting. And I can't even imagine what doing leadership training with women in the Middle East is like, because they've got so many extra challenges to what we have in the West.
They do. And, I lived and worked abroad for 8 years in Southeast Asia and Central America. And I have to say, when I went overseas on the first day, I did think to myself, actually, this is not for me. It's a step too far. The cultural differences are too big. But on the second day, they all came in and they just absolutely loved it. And I've had some of the best feedback I've ever had from it. But it was a challenge. I will be completely honest. It was a challenge. But it was very rewarding. Apart from that.
Yeah. And do you work from home when you're not gallivanting?
I do work from home mainly. I have just started, it's a bit of an experiment really. I've hired an office one morning a week in Newark, which is a short train ride away, just to give me a bit of a change of scenery, change the energy up a little bit. And that's working nicely. Whether I will continue that over after Christmas or not, I don't know. But I have found, I mean, I've been in business now for about 9 years, that I don't know, just the urge, I just needed some different surroundings and a bit of different energy. And that seems to be kind of meeting that need for me at the moment. But mainly, I've got an office now, a dedicated office at home, which is quite a luxury, and I'm very lucky to have it. And it's a very nice working environment, and a room that I use as well to see any local one-to-one clients as well. So it's quite nice.
It's interesting, that thing about sort of working outside of home. One of my friends, Kathy, who was actually on the first show that we did, Kathy Brown, she signed up when she was doing a particular role for a while with a local co-working space, because she really needs people around her when she's working, even though she's obviously working, individually. And I think I've said before on the podcast, I now quite often I'm working all around my house. I mean, it might be from bed, from the garden, from my office, from the dining room table, from the kitchen table. And I was reflecting yesterday. I was on the train actually going into London, and thinking how I do very specific things on the train, because it really cuts down my options, because with the high-speed train in Kent, we go through so many tunnels that the internet's rubbish.
Right.
So really, I can only do offline work on the train. So actually, some of the deep work, writing blog posts or reading things, or sort of certain things that I've set up, knowing I won't have the internet, I sort of think I always need to build in a London trip every week, just so I get that time to do those things that I wouldn't do otherwise.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, because when I last year I was up and down to London quite a lot on the train for work, and I cannot work on a laptop on the train, and I see loads of people doing it, but it's really not for me. And I take some of that time to catch up on reading. I'm a recent convert to podcasts, so I've started listening to stuff. And Joe, just looking out the window and having a bit of downtime. If you've been delivering a full day's workshop, the last thing I want to do is get back on my laptop and start doing work. So, I hop on my phone and pootle around a little bit on social media. But I think, having that downtime in your day, when you can't be connected to the world, or you don't want to be connected to the world, is actually quite a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a bit about the backstory. So you've been in business 9 years, and you have a very specific mission in terms of women and leadership. How have you ended up doing that, given everything that you've done in the past?
Well, my background was in teaching, and as I mentioned, when it was in 2002, I was a single mum, and I moved overseas to Southeast Asia, to the island of Borneo. I gave up my job, gave my sister my car, sold my house, and moved overseas. And that was like a pivotal moment in my life, really, and it kind of propelled me into a situation where I was completely alone, apart from my little boy. So I was in a different country, different culture. I had no support mechanisms around me whatsoever, and it all felt quite alien. And putting myself in that situation helped me to draw on inner resources of strength and confidence that I didn't realize that I had. And it made me act very consciously to build relationships, to network. And I look back now, this is what I was doing at the time. And as a teacher, I didn't call it all of those things. I didn't realize what I was doing. But with hindsight, that's clearly what I was doing. So I would network, put myself in, challenging new situations, force myself to go to these, to events, and build a network and make friends. And then when I moved to Central America, I had to do exactly the same thing again. And then when I moved back to the UK in 2010, I did exactly the same thing again. We moved back to a part of the country where we'd not lived previously. And at this point, I got married. So I had my husband with me, but I changed careers. So I left teaching, and I was in middle management in a school. And So I'd done that for 20 years, and I knew that I wanted to set up my own business. So I set about retraining as a coach, and then hit the networking scene in Lincoln and networked like a mad thing for about 2 years. And it was exactly the same skills I needed, going into unknown situations with people you don't know, and building relationships and putting yourself out there, and having to be confident, demonstrate confidence, create the impact you wanted to have, even though inside, certainly in those early days, it was like, what the hell am I doing here? I don't know anything about the business world. It was immersing myself in that new situation. And then when I started building my business, over I would say over the last 5 years, the whole leadership presence and personal impact thing has become a real thing for me. And it draws on those early experiences. And when you're in a new leadership role, or you want a new leadership role, it's the same kind of skills and knowledge that you need, that I needed then all those years ago. How do I want people to experience me? What impact do I want to make? How am I going to build the right networks for myself? Am I going to be connecting with the right people, and all of those sorts of things? And the women issue is just something very close to my heart. I look at the state of the world leaders and I despair. I think they're appalling, and I think there's a new way for leadership, and that is a more I don't want to get all fluffy here, but female leaders have a lot to offer, and we have a different style, a different way of doing things, and there needs to be more room for us, not only because it benefits the world, but actually it's the right thing to do. And if study upon study has shown that organisations where there are equal numbers of men and women in senior leadership roles are happier, more positive places to work, and they are more profitable. And that's the bottom line for it. So that's why I'm here, Joe, and that's what I do. And the whole the visibility book that I wrote, it's a thing I've found with clients, a real reluctance to speak up and share their successes, their skills, their strengths, and ask for what they want. I did a workshop a couple of weeks ago, and there was a woman there who was the CEO of an organisation, and we were talking about speaking up and asking, and she gave an example of a young man who'd started in her organisation, and she said he's very clearly said to me, I want a job like yours, I want to be a CEO. And she said he's obviously decades off it yet, but just him voicing that in the office has made people look at him differently, and he's now being given opportunities that he wasn't being given before. And I watched every woman's face in that room, just this dawning realization, and their jaws were hitting the floor because none of them were doing it. And the sad fact is, if you don't raise your profile, and if the right people don't know what you want, you won't get it. You just won't. And I just thought, right, there's, I can help. I can help here. And that's what I did, and that's why I wrote that book. And it's kind of, it's something I feel. I think passion's an overused word, but it is something that I'm driven by, I would say. Yeah. So,
there's so much in there. Firstly, I want to say, oh my God, how mad was that to go to Borneo as a single mum?
Yeah, I know. And when I look back now, when I did it at the time, it was just something I did. And it's only when I've come back the other side of it and I start telling people that story, they have that reaction, like, you did what? And yes, I did. And it was, I was in, and the thing is, Joe, I was in my late 30s when I did it, and I use this. I do some talks and motivational speeches and things, and I say to people, you don't have to be in your early 20s at the beginning of your career to think that you can up sticks and do these things, because I was in my late 30s with a 9-year-old son. I've been on my own with him since he was 4 months old. I had the house, the job, the car, the whole lot. And I just made that change. Now, it sounds as though I made it overnight. I didn't. I had a job to go to. It was a considered and planned move. But I challenge anybody, the biggest constraints we put in our lives that come from ourselves and the stories we tell ourselves. And you can and most, I'm going to say everything is possible, but most things are more possible than you might think.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. Yeah, they said it wasn't even a midlife crisis. That was like a pre-midlife crisis. So maybe
It
you're due to
was,
do
yeah.
soon. Yeah, really. And it's interesting the thing you were saying about, sort of setting out your stall, that guy that said, that's what he wanted to do. I think I read one of
Yeah.
your blogs yesterday and have shared it or will do, about somebody leaving an organisation and everyone clamouring for the role. It was the pen one. That was you, wasn't it?
Yes, it
Organisation.
was. Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. About positioning.
The role because they think it's this sexy role to have and everything else. But the person who actually is likely to get the role is the person who's, planned their future and made sure they got to know the right people and studied,
Yeah.
the routes and all that sort of thing. And it's interesting because having been in corporate myself and having had my own business now for 13, 14 years, I often say, bearing in mind I do employee engagement and leadership, training and facilitation, that
Yes.
that I think quite often people in corporates are quite one-dimensional, and I mean that in terms of their sort of outlook on business and their careers, because you, especially if you work for a big company, you grow up with the company culture and this is how we do things around here. And certainly myself, I came up in the retail industry and I worked for really big companies. And we never networked outside of our company because we didn't need to. We had a massive organisation and we networked within our organisation, which was fine whilst we were working there and moving around within it. But obviously then when you start to move outside of that or start to think about shaping yourself as a leader and your career and everything else, there's a massive gap because you haven't really been out in the sort of big wide world, if you like. Is that
That's
something that
right.
you can do?
Yeah, that's right. And the fact is, particularly these days, gone are the jobs for life.
Yeah,
And there's so much movement in the job market that a huge part of developing, your career is it's not enough these days, I think, to be internally networked. You have to be
yeah,
externally networked as well. And when you do that, it opens you up and you can feel quite vulnerable. And that is about, how do you present yourself? How do you want people to think about you? How do you want them to experience you? What side of yourself do you want to show to people? Managing online profiles, using LinkedIn or Twitter, for example. A lot of leaders don't have skills in doing that, and it's an important part of managing your reputation and deciding what you want to be known for. And if you want to move organizations, then you have really got to seriously think about how you're going to put your best foot forward, how you're going to present yourself online and out there in your industry. And
yeah.
that is part of what I help clients to do, is to think about
Mm.
that bigger picture.
Yeah, and just a little cough here. Yeah, and of course, there's so many parallels between that and being a business owner, running your own business
Yes.
and getting out there and making those
Mm.
connections too. So let's just sort of dwell on this for a minute. I don't know, three top tips or the key thing that you think's important for people in terms of that getting themselves out there, whether they be a business owner or within a leadership role within a corporate.
I think it's thinking about relationships, who do you know and who knows you and who knows what you can do? And there's a phrase I use when I do workshops, and that is, you've got to be loved by the right people. And that is true wherever you work, whether you work for yourself or whether you work for somebody else.
Mm.
If you want to grow your business, you've got to be loved by the right people that are going to buy your products and services. And if you work for somebody else and you want to, take your career to further heights, again, you've got to be loved by the right people. The right people have got to know you and know what you can do. So I think you can't get away from the fact that relationships really are at the heart of everything. I think. I think consistency is a word that keeps coming up again and again for me. One of the reasons I believe I've been successful as a business owner is because I'm consistent, and I've had that feedback from people. I have consistently used social media for 9 years. I use it in slightly different ways than I did 9 years ago, but I use it consistently. I have consistently produced content that I share on social media. I've written books. I've been consistent in developing my message and putting my message out there. And I think a mistake a lot of business people make is they don't have that consistency, and they might do a few tweets this week and next week while they remember, but then they'll leave it for another 6 weeks. They'll do a few posts on LinkedIn, and then they'll go away and won't come back to it. They'll write a blog post once every 6 months, and and I see this quite often, and I hear the frustration from people. Well, why am I not getting more clients? Why isn't this happening? Why isn't that happening? And it's because you're not there. I'm sure you'll find this, Joe. You've got to be front of mind for people, which means you've got to be visible. And when somebody thinks about the service or goods that you provide, your name needs to be the one that comes to mind for them. And that will only happen if you are consistently there. I had a lovely client once, and she said to me, when those doors of opportunity open, Sue, she said, I want to be standing there, she said, in that door frame with my hands, either side of me, saying, I'm here, this is me. It just really made me smile, because and she was really successful. It's because she was there. I would say that is absolutely key.
I absolutely agree, and I have my own examples of how I might make that happen, and it's around systems and processes and outsourcing. Yes. And I've got something happening, just making sure there's a way of it happening really easily, otherwise it isn't going to keep. How do you make that happen for you?
Oh, right. Well, I'm a big fan of paper and pen, so I still keep a traditional paper diary, and it's got a week to review, so I can look at my week and see where I've got things in, and I find that helps me enormously. I have tried an online diary on my phone in the past. Many years ago, I had a BlackBerry and it crashed on me and I lost everything on it, and that frightened me, so I've always had a paper diary since then. I'm a big fan of a notebook, and everything has to be written down for me. Having said that, I did discover a few years ago Microsoft, is it Word or OneNote? I don't know who it is by. OneNote I found quite useful, because it allows you to, you can clip things from the internet and post that anywhere on the page, and that's quite a useful tool. But I don't use anything else really as sort of apart from that, if you like. And I've got things like so I like using, there's an app called Flipboard. I don't know if you've come across it. It allows you to collate news articles into magazines, and you follow different topics, and it's very good for keeping yourself up to date. It's like a portal for everything, and that I use that quite a lot, and it gets all of the top information about various topics I'm interested in one place, and that saves me an awful lot of time.
I've used that for years, and now I've got an iPad Pro with a nice big screen. I must go back to it, because it is a beautiful interface, I remember.
It's lovely. It's really nice.
RSS feeds together, but I must revisit Flipboard.
And I came across something called Pocket the other day that somebody recommended on Twitter, but I can't quite work out how it works and whether it's just a different version of Flipboard. I'm not sure, but how
it works, if you'd like. I use it extensively.
Oh, do you? So tell me about it then.
I guess yes, it would be an alternative to Flipboard, but the way that I use it and find it really useful is that anything I come across that I want to read, I just add it to Pocket. So you have it on your browser or you have it on your phone or whatever, and you just share to it, and then it keeps it all there until you read it. So that bit about you get a newsletter and there's 3 links to really interesting looking articles, but you really don't have time to read them now, and you open them up on tabs and you think I'll read them later, and then you shut your computer down and you lose them and all that stuff.
Yeah.
With Pocket, you literally can open them, add it to Pocket, and you've got it. And it works offline as well. So those times you're on the train and you haven't got internet access, you can use your Pocket articles and read through there. And then I have it connected to my Buffer account through Zapier, the automation tool, so that I can tag things, and then as a result of tagging them, they automatically get shared onto my social media. So I've used Pocket for a long time, and I can't remember with Flipboard, is it RSS feeds it pulls in, or is it, as you say, particular hashtags that you're following, or how does it know which?
I think it's a hashtag. I think it must be on a hashtag. I'm not very technical, but you tell it what subjects you're interested in. So I've got, leadership, emotional intelligence, women's things, and it draws them all together. And then you open up the stream and you flick through, and then you can find an article you want, and you can share it to your own magazines or So I think that must be how it works.
And does that work offline as well?
Say that again, sorry.
Work offline as well?
I don't know that it does.
So that might be, so I use Feedly to collate content that I might be interested in. So, for example, the reason I read your article is that when I have a podcast guest signed up, I automatically add their blog to my Feedly account. So once a week I go through Feedly and add any content that I see on there into my Pocket account that I'm interested in reading for later, if you like. I guess Flipboard probably fits within that, so I'll have to go back and see how that then works. So it's a Pocket for you, by the sound of it, would be for those offline moments or articles that you do want to read but you haven't got time to read now. You can then collate them within that app, and that might be a nice way of being able to go to them when you're ready, sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. The other thing I've started using is my timer on my phone. If I'm not in a training room, I'm generally sitting at a desk, and I have found, I'm in my early 50s now, sitting down all the time isn't doing me any favours. So I set timers. So I'll set a timer maybe for half an hour, really work productively for half an hour, then I'll get up and I'll go and do something for another 20 minutes. And I've found the days where I stick to that, I am incredibly productive, and it feels really good. And I know you can get those Pomodoro technique timers, can't you, that do a similar thing. But I'm finding at the moment actually just setting the timer on my phone works really nicely. So what other things?
Those timings gives you flexibility. So if you set your timer for 25 minutes or 45 minutes or whatever, and then you want to take 20 minutes to do something different, you can just do that. Whereas if you use an app, then it's you have to sort of determine what a work period looks like and what a break period looks like, and you can't then be flexible.
No, that's right. That's right. So I'm finding that's really really helpful. And the other thing I do is I diarise most things, so in that way I can fit in things like exercise, going for a walk. I'm no longer a gym member, but when I would diarise my gym sessions, and then I could work around them. So I'm a big fan of if you want to get something done, put it in your diary as a discrete activity, and then that allows you to work around it and therefore work it into your day. And I also decide the night before what my main tasks are going to be. And if I don't do that, I struggle. I flounder, and I end up feeling quite purposeless sometimes. So for me, that is just a very simple thing, but it works really well. I get up and I think, right, okay, I'm doing A, B, and C first thing. And it helps me almost to feel like I'm going to work, if you know what I mean. And then I've got a background list of tasks that I know have to be done at some point, and I have to write it all down or record it somewhere. Gone are the days of trying to remember all of these things. It just doesn't work.
It's interesting you say about the pen and paper. I regularly say to people that probably 95% of my guests have said that they err on the side of pen and paper and not technology, which is different to me. And so it interests me, every time people say that. And I was showing a colleague yesterday my new membership site, Power to Live More Calm, and they're in there under the materials section is a sleep journal. And it was really funny because she said, I said, so obviously if you're somebody who's looking at focusing on improving your sleep, then this is something that you could use. I said, it's not for everyone. I said, I wouldn't use it because she said, oh, well, I use an app to monitor my sleep. Why would I use that? And I said, well, so do I. I said, but do you know, 95% of people I talk to on my podcast use pen and paper. So it would be useful to them because they can monitor it by writing it all down. I said, it's not what I would do, but, it's interesting how many people love pen and paper.
I think with a pen in my hand, and I'm talking to you now, and I've got a pen in my hand, and there's no need to, but there's just something about it, and there's something about the physical process of writing that helps it to stick with me. It helps me to be a bit more considered, and I spend an awful lot of time online staring at a screen, Joe, and I'm finding that I have to wear glasses for reading. My eyes get very sore, and my posture isn't always wonderful if I've been at the computer or staring at my phone for a long time. And I just think for my own health and well-being, really, going back to those old-fashioned ways of doing things, and post-it notes. If I'm planning, big sheet of paper or post-it notes on my summer room wall. Fantastic. I'm very visual, and I think one of the things for me is on a phone screen. So with my diary, it brings it up day by day. I like to see a week at a glance what I've got in my diary, and I can only do that on a paper diary. So who knows, at some point I may have to move to an online booking system, for example, but at the moment it's not an issue for me. But I never say never, but
it's horses for courses, and personal preference, everything to do with one of the things I've always found interesting in the whole sort of productivity organization space with people is that it's all well and good to say this is something that could be useful and does work. It's like, well, it could be useful and does work for me. It may not be for you, and it may not work for you, and you might need to do something completely different. It's all so personal, and we've just shown this already about where you work, what you work with, and studies have shown that writing can be really helpful in sort of internalizing stuff. So there's evidence to say that's really important too. But then there's people, I don't know if you're one of these people, when you have a conversation with somebody, you always have to sort of sketch out the outline. I remember having a coffee with a friend a couple of years ago talking about a new product that I was thinking about, and she grabbed a bit of paper and started like making a diagram to show how it would all sort of plan out. Wouldn't even cross my mind to get a pen and paper and do that at all. It just is not my thing. It's really funny because some people need that to think, don't they?
They do, and I would do exactly the same. I would do exactly the same. Almost make a map of it, and that's very much my thing, and it does help my thought processes.
I could never have these businesses that was planned out on the back of a fag packet, as they say. Yeah. Because I wouldn't draw any of it out. So, I might end up with this massive big conglomerate and not have that as a story. But maybe that's why. Maybe you need that in order for it to work really well. Learning and improving yourself. I mean, you've had massive life changes, and you've already talked about how you've taken those learnings into, the next thing. And I guess some of it was in retrospect. We often do things and don't realise how much we're learning in the moment. But moving forward, how you haven't moved across the world this year. How are you keeping yourself developing?
I'm an avid reader, so I read lots of books. I'm a member of the UK Association for Coaching, sort of like the professional body for leadership and executive coaching. So I occasionally listen to their webinars or go on one of their courses. I have just started listening to things, which is quite a departure for me, really. And podcasts. I've quite got into podcasts, and one of the ways I like listening to those is going for a walk. So I walk walk to the supermarket, 15-20 minute walk, and I'll plug myself into a podcast. And there's some absolutely great ones out there that I really enjoy. There's one called How to Own the Room by a comedian called Viv Goscrop. I think that's how you say her name. And it's fantastic. And she interviews famous women for their advice on how to show up and be seen and ace public speaking. And they're fantastic to listen to, and it's a subject after my own heart. So that's been really interesting to listen to as well. So I find that, and audiobooks, I've just signed up to Audible, partly because my own book is going to be on Audible, and I thought I'd better listen to some and hear how they're done. And that's again a really interesting thing for me, because it stops me kind of multitasking. I don't multitask actually. No, it makes me pay attention in a different way to what I do when I read. Now, whether I'm going to have to go back and listen to things twice and make notes, because again, it's the whole writing thing. I like to make notes, so and we'll see how that goes. But I've just started listening. Brené Brown, her Dare to Lead book, I've just started listening to that one. But I've got bookshelves and bookshelves and bookshelves of books that I just love.
Yes, yeah, no, I'm much the same. Although I think I go through sort of stages of like really into listening and devour all the podcasts, and then stop doing that and read lots, and it almost seems like I have to sort of change it up a bit, like going into different rooms to work and be productive.
Yeah.
Same on the
yeah.
So we've been talking sort of productivity and how you organise yourself. I'd be really interested in your sort of thoughts about how people in leadership roles in organisations are being affected in sort of this modern world, if you like, of digital and email and overwhelm and all that sort of thing. Because I see a lot of business owners focusing on some of this stuff and the personal development piece, because it's almost a theme. If you've got your own business and you're a coach or a consultant or whatever, all around you are people talking about how you need to work on yourself and develop yourself and all that sort of thing. And that isn't always such a strong theme within organisations, but I think it needs to be. What are you seeing with that and with the modern world, as it were, for the future leaders?
I think this whole idea of overwhelm is underappreciated, and whenever I work with one-to-one clients, there are various topics that always come up. There's always a conversation, for example, around demonstrating confidence, battling the imposter, and what have you. But something else that comes up frequently, and I think is not given enough credit, is the importance of managing your energy and focus and minimizing feelings of overwhelm. And I think if you don't learn to manage your energy and your focus properly, those feelings of overwhelm and that you're not coping will very quickly knock the legs out from under you and just derail you. And it's surprisingly quickly that it happens. And the things that you talk about, Joe, the importance of prioritizing. What is it that you should be doing and only you can do, and why isn't everything else delegated off to somebody else? Just those basic questions. What is it you should be doing in your role? Why are you still doing all the other stuff that you did before you got this role? And that's quite common because they know how to do it. It's a comfort blanket. And so there's generally always a conversation around that. But we're on call all the time, aren't we? It's social media. I mean, I'm as guilty as this of anybody. I have periods where I'm very aware. I think actually, I'm spending far too much time on Twitter of an evening or whatever. and then times where it will just, my usage will gradually build up again, and I see this in people, and it's not doing us, it's not doing us, we're not well because of that habit, and it's doing us a disservice. And I think, getting systems and processes in place, understanding the nature of your role, what your priorities are, being consistent, like I said earlier, and being ruthless as well, and really setting tight boundaries around yourself, and learning to say no. Not always possible, and I do say to clients, if saying no will get you the sack, don't say no. But um, but if you are somebody who says yes to everything, and then you're heading for a nervous breakdown or something, for goodness sake, we've got a responsibility to make sure that we're well, and learning to set proper boundaries for ourselves. You can't, and I say this coming as a recovered people pleaser. You make a rod for your own back, so it's incredibly important to make sure that your work and your life that includes your work is one that promotes your health and well-being as much as you can.
It's so key. It's a real theme in organisations. And we're recording this on World Mental Health Day, or whatever the title is. All these days I can never get the words right. And there's such a focus on the whole mental health piece, in the country as a whole, and organisations are picking that up from a sort of well-being point of view. But not always, but in lots of these cases, I see that there's a disconnect between, thinking it's important and thinking we need to do something about it, and then piling a load of, crap on people, expecting them to get it done regardless. And those two things often, are at odds, and it's really difficult to stop that happening. But what we need is people to manage their own, as you say, boundaries, and sort of understand it's their energy and their mental well-being that they need to take responsibility for, regardless of what's going on around them, sort of thing.
Exactly. And I think you're quite right. There is often a disconnect, and it's almost like you need to hold the mirror up to some of these organisations and some of these teams and some of these offices and say, look, you're saying this, but the reality is this. And that's where good quality leadership comes in, Joe, isn't it? Leaders who prioritise their teams, their people, and they treat people as human beings, and encourage people to leave on time or limit the amount of overtime that they do. They encourage people to get up from their desks. They don't make unhealthy and unhelpful office rules, or they encourage people to take a lunch hour, to eat some food, to move around, and they create a culture within their team, their office, their organisation that is kind to people. And I use Twitter a lot. And at the moment, you know what, I'm quite horrified by it. The behaviour I see on it, the names people are calling other people, and I just think we're just descending into these murky depths of quite bad behaviour, and it needs to change. It really does need to change, and it can start with being intentional about how am I being today? How am I showing up? And am I being as kind as I can be? How am I speaking to the people in my office? And all of those basics of what it means to be a decent human being. And it's not rocket science, but somewhere along the line, I think we've all kind of forgotten this, which is a bit sad, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, we're getting all deep here. So, it's been such a great conversation, and a further opportunity to connect, as we said, other than our sort of social media relationship. A couple more questions for you, though, to finish off. Firstly, what about on those days where it all goes horribly wrong for you? How do you deal with those?
I get up and I walk away. So I had this last week. I was trying to do something and it just wasn't working. So I shut my computer down, pushed my chair under, and I walked away. And I went and read a book. I watched some TV. I potter in the kitchen, do some cooking, and I go back to it again the next day with fresh eyes. And if it's still a challenge, then I will ask somebody. I'll pick up the phone or say, right, what do you think about this? But give yourself some space. It's yeah, almost everything can wait 24 hours. Not everything, granted, but a bit of space, a bit of time, a bit of headspace, and you come back to things with a fresh perspective. And I also think having a coaching ear, and by that I mean it doesn't have to be a professional coach, but somebody who listens very well, and can hold up the mirror to you a bit. And my husband's very good at this. He's a voice of reason, and he's kept me from many a meltdown in the past just by helping me see reason. And to have somebody like that to speak to is absolutely invaluable, and it can be a friend, family member, partner, a child. My son's very good at it as well. Somebody that can see past the crisis that you might be in and actually say, hold on a minute, you're not seeing clearly here. And I'm a great believer that the world can be put to rights over a cup of tea and a biscuit as well. Go and put the kettle on. That's my first port of call.
Yes, sounds like a good plan. It have to be a gluten-free biscuit for me though, but we'll go for that.
Mine would be accompanied by a slice of cheddar cheese. So.
Oh, and tea. Interesting.
And tea, yeah.
Well, there you go. We won't go there. So, last question, although it might crop up as an answer to this question. On those days when you get to live more, and that's where I talk about getting to do more of the things you want to do and less of the things that you feel you should do or you have to do, what does that day look like for you? Does it include cheese and tea?
It probably include cheese and a glass of wine at some point along the way. On those days, and those days for me are typically when my husband has a day off and we go out for the day. And so I live in Lincolnshire, about an hour and a half from the coast. So we might go to the seaside. I love going to the seaside, walking along the beach, having fish and chips, having a drink somewhere, a good walk to blow away the cobwebs, coming home, having a bath, getting in my pajamas, snuggling up under a blanket and watching something on TV. And that is just a perfect way to spend a day. And we're going to Cornwall tomorrow, and I intend to do quite a lot of that stuff.
Sounds lush. It's funny. I've never really been a change into my pajamas type of person, but I have got sort of home clothes that I have to change out of when I, go out. But I've recently got some pajamas that are really nice and comfortable, so I have started to get into that.
Yes,
so I know what you mean.
yeah, it's lovely. Just getting rid of the day. Having a bath. I like bubble baths as well. And I, put meditation on in the bubble bath. But for me, a nice bracing walk along a beach, fish and chips and fresh air blowing through my hair is lovely. I don't think you can beat it.
No, it's funny. Talk about fish and chips. Ellie asked me the other day when payday was, which is interesting because my husband has a corporate job. I immediately knew what she meant. It was because quite often we'll say we're having payday tea, which is fish and chips.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I said we didn't have it then, did we? But we'd had it on a separate day, so you can only have it once a month. She's already, planning it in her diary as to, when's the next day that she can ask for fish and chips.
Exactly.
So yeah, she knows exactly what you mean. I don't know. Lovely. Yeah. Brilliant speaking to you, Sue. Tell people how they can find out more about you and connect with you.
Okay, so my website is Susan Ritchie, and that's ritchie.co.uk, and there's loads of articles there that I've written. There's some resources and there are some free books that you can download as well. I'm on Twitter, and that's at Susan J Ritchie, and I'm on Twitter quite often, so pop and say hello. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I think I'm Sue Ritchie on LinkedIn as well. So you can find me there. I've got an Instagram feed as well. I am Sue Ritchie. I don't often talk about that. And that is where you will see pictures of my dinner and stuff. But so yeah, those are the social media places. And my books are available on Amazon, Waterstones. The second one is Barnes and Noble if you're in the States, and Kindle. And the green one will shortly be available as an audiobook as well, which is quite exciting. So yeah, come and say hi. It'd be lovely to virtually meet some of your listeners, Jo.
Lovely. Thanks, Sue.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
All this information is available in the show notes. If you go to powertolivemore.com/, in this case 139, you'll find them there. And I'd just like to say Happy New Year. Hope it all went well for you. We had our French friends over for the evening, and it was quite funny because we'd seen them the previous week. We were skiing in France in the Alps, and we had lunch with them on Christmas Day, and they live just over in the north of France, so they'd come home at the same time that we did, and they came over here for New Year. So a week apart, we saw them in two completely different places. So there's lots of talk at the moment about planning for the new year, about setting resolutions and all that sort of thing. And if you'd listened to the podcast for a while, you'll know that I don't particularly set really sort of defined objectives for what I do in my business or my life. I like to have a vision of what I want to do or what I want things to look like in the future, and then sort of corral what I do towards that vision in various ways. And I really believe in taking small daily actions in the right direction rather than sort of getting really caught up in lots of big planning processes and then not actually achieving half of what you've set out to do for various reasons, whether that be because you've done all the planning but then actually putting it into practice is the next step and doesn't quite happen, or because you don't take those small daily actions to move you towards whatever those objectives are. And also I think the thing with January and New Year's resolutions, and all the people who end up down the gym for a week or two and then that's it sort of thing, that we get all excited about these sort of new beginnings and plan in far too much and plan in far too many changes in our life, which is really hard to sustain, and so it doesn't then happen. So I do think about how things are going to be as I move forwards, whether that be in January or September after the summer, or maybe after Easter or whenever it might be. But I also don't think that it's about just sort of, as I said, one time of the year, and it's about thinking about habits and small changes that you can make that you can sustain and keep doing to move you towards that end vision, rather than necessarily starting a new part of your year or life or whatever with 25 million new things that you're going to do and 10 things you're going to drop that you've been doing forever and all that sort of thing, because it's just so difficult to keep that change happening if you make such radical changes. So on that note, I have got an exercise that I read from Tim Ferriss, who wrote the 4-Hour Workweek a few years ago, which you might want to try, which is to look back at your calendar over the last year and do a column of positive and a column for negative, and each week go through and make a note in the positive column of all the things that happened that were obviously positive and all the things that happened that stand out through the year that were negative, that sort of took you in the wrong direction. And then at the end of that review, think about how you can do more of those things that are in the positive column this year. So see the people, do the things, arrange stuff that's more similar to the positive stuff that happened that helped to move you towards your vision. And how can you stop doing the stuff that was in the negative column, or at least reduce what you do related to the stuff in that column. So don't see those people that are draining your energy rather than adding to it. Don't do the things that caused issues or cause you issues or that you don't want to do. So basically, a bit like I talk about in my fundamental of simplicity, how do you work out how you can do more of the things that you want to do and less of the things that you don't want to do or that are negative and don't work for you. So give that a go and do let me know how you get on. You can always email me, jo@powertolivemore.com. We're doing it in the membership this week and going to talk about it at our weekly Calm call on Friday. So looking forward to seeing how the members have got on with that, and I'll be doing it myself.
The other thing you might want to do as part of your planning for 2020 is come along to my webinar, which is actually on Monday the 6th of January, i.e. tomorrow, if you're listening to this as soon as it's been published. But it will be live for a week before I put it into my membership site, and I will give you more notice in future of such things. If you remember last week, I did say that it was coming up and that I'd let you know about it this week. Part of my delay has been putting in place a process to be able to do these on the first Monday of every month for 2020, and I do like a good process in order to kick things off. Just that obviously I've been on holiday and I left it right to the last minute. But anyway, what I'm going to be talking about tomorrow is my 5 fundamentals for being able to live more whilst running a successful business. And so that will be a good opportunity to have a think about how you can apply those fundamentals into your life and your business for that purpose. And there's also a checklist which is available on my website already that you'll be able to download to be able to review each of those fundamentals in terms of your own life and business. So I urge you to pop over to powertolivemore.com/next webinar, and actually when you're there you can join the webinar list so that I can remind you when they're coming up, but you can also register for all of the webinars for the year. So you only have to register once and then you can just join each of the webinars, and throughout the year we'll be talking about various topics that relate to home-based coaches and consultants and the challenges that we have in running our businesses, but also in being able to live more at the same time. So we're going to cover areas like outsourcing, email management, productivity and getting stuff done, and simplifying, and some of my other fundamentals as well. So do come along to powertolivemore.com/next webinar so that you can register for those. And then, as I say, each month I will send out reminders so that you know what the current topic is. And as I said, even if you're not available to listen to the live webinars, then do bear in mind that they will be recorded and live on my Power to Live More website for at least a week after each of the webinars before they go into the membership site. And of course, if you're looking to look back at previous webinars, you can always join the membership, which you can find out more about if you go to powertolivemore.com/get calm. I haven't actually taken down the 2019 offer at the moment, which is for a month free and then £37 a month moving forwards. I will be taking that down shortly. As I said, I haven't really been working over the last couple of weeks, and once that's come down, then the ongoing price will be £97 a month for membership. So if you have been thinking about joining, then quickly would be a good option, because you'll get the best deal before I make any changes for 2020. So finally, again, the show notes are at powertolivemore.com/139, and we look forward to speaking to you next week.
Use your power to live more.